In 1592, Japan launched one of the largest naval invasions in Asian history. Over 150,000 soldiers crossed the sea toward Korea. The Korean army collapsed within weeks. Seoul fell in 19 days. Japan was on its way to conquering the entire Korean peninsula, and from there, China itself. One man stopped them. Not because he had a bigger army, not because he had more ships, but because in over 24 naval battles across 6 years of war, he never once lost. Not a single battle, not a single ship under his command. His name was Yi Sun-sin. Born in 1545 in Seoul, into an aristocratic family that had served the Joseon dynasty for generations. His childhood was unremarkable by most standards. He was serious, disciplined, and intensely focused on military study from a young age. When he sat for his military examinations in 1572, his horse threw him. He fell and broke his leg during the riding test. He stood up, stripped bark from a nearby willow tree, fashioned a splint himself, finished the examination, and passed. It was the first sign that this was not a man who stayed down. His military career was repeatedly interrupted by the same thing, his own integrity. When he encountered corrupt practices among his superiors, he refused to ignore them. And every time he refused, powerful men made sure he paid for it. He was demoted, transferred, sidelined, all before the war had even started. In 1591, despite his enemies at court, Yi was appointed commander of the left Jeolla Naval District on Korea's southern coast. What he found there was not reassuring. Ships in poor condition, sailors with little training, supplies running low. He had 1 year before the Japanese invasion. He spent every day of it preparing. He didn't just repair what was there. He built something new. The Geobuxion, the turtle ship. It was a warship unlike anything in the region at the time. Its upper deck was covered in iron plates studded with metal spikes, making it impossible for enemy soldiers to board. Its bow was shaped like a dragon's head, through which cannon could fire and smoke could pour to obscure the ship's position. Cannons pointed in every direction, front, back, both sides. It could attack from any angle without ever letting the enemy get close enough to board. The first turtle ship was completed the day before the Japanese invasion began. One day, if Yi had been any slower, that ship would have been useless timber in a burning shipyard. On May 23, 1592, Japan's invasion force landed. The size of it was overwhelming. The Korean army had no answer for samurai troops armed with muskets acquired from Portuguese traders, a weapon the Korean military had never encountered in battle before. Seoul fell. The king fled north. The ground war was already lost. Yi received word and moved immediately. He had never commanded a naval battle before, neither had any of his officers. Korea had no naval academy, no tradition of fleet warfare. Everything Yi knew, he had taught himself. His first battle was at Okpo, a bay where Japanese ships sat anchored and their crews were ashore looting villages. Yi surrounded them. He opened fire with his long-range cannon before the Japanese even reached their ships. He destroyed dozens of vessels. He lost none. He didn't stop. He moved down the coast like a methodical machine, striking Japanese supply fleets, destroying warships, cutting the supply lines that the land invasion depended on. Battle of Sacheon. Battle of Dangpo. Battle of Danghangpo. He won everyone. He lost nothing. Then came Hansen Island. July 1592. The battle historians compare to the ancient Battle of Salamis. Yi lured a large Japanese fleet out of a narrow strait into open water using a classic feigned retreat. Then he deployed his crane wing formation, his ships spreading into a wide arc, that surrounded the Japanese fleet on three sides simultaneously. Trapped, unable to maneuver, the Japanese fleet was destroyed. Over 50 warships sunk. Thousands of Japanese sailors and soldiers killed. Yi lost no ships. The Japanese high command was shaken. For the first time since the invasion began, their generals understood that the sea was not theirs. Without control of the sea, Japan could not reliably supply its army on the Korean peninsula. The invasion that had swept north in 19 days began to slow, then stall, then struggle. Yi had not won a single land battle. He had not needed to. But his success made him enemies at home just as much as abroad. Rivals at court, resentful of his fame and influence, began feeding false intelligence to the king. They accused Yi of deliberately refusing to engage the enemy, of cowardice, of disloyalty. In 1597, the accusations worked. Yi was arrested, stripped of his rank, tortured, and sentenced to death. He was eventually spared execution and demoted to the lowest possible rank, common foot soldier. The greatest admiral in Korean history, marching on foot. His replacement, a rival named Won-gyun, led the Korean fleet directly into a Japanese trap. The Battle of Chilchonryang was a catastrophe. The Japanese destroyed almost the entire Joseon fleet in a single engagement. Won-gyun fled. He was caught and killed. Korea's naval power, which Yi had spent years building, was gone overnight. Japan launched its second invasion immediately. With no navy to stop them, the Japanese swept back across the sea. The king, desperate, sent a message to Yi Sun-sin, "Come back." Yi arrived to find 12 ships, 12, and roughly 200 surviving sailors. The king sent another message telling him to abandon the ships entirely and join the land forces. There was no point in a navy of 12. Yi's reply became one of the most famous lines in Korean history. He wrote back, "After all, I still have 12 ships. As long as I live, our enemies will never look down on us." He was not going to abandon those ships. He was going to fight. He studied the Myeongyang Strait obsessively, its narrow width, its violent tidal currents that shifted direction with precise timing. He knew exactly where to be and exactly when the tide would work for him rather than against him. The Japanese sent over 300 warships to finish what little remained of the Korean Navy. Yi had 12. The odds were roughly 25-1. On October 26, 1597, Yi positioned his 12 ships in the narrowest part of the strait. In that narrow channel, the Japanese fleet of 300 ships couldn't deploy. They had to come at him in a line. The tidal current, exactly as Yi had calculated, began dragging Japanese ships sideways as they tried to advance. Yi's ships opened fire with their long-range cannon from a distance the Japanese couldn't match. Japanese ships piled into each other in the current. Confusion spread through the fleet. Yi stood at the front of his flagship, visible to his men, directing the battle personally. By the end of the day, 31 Japanese warships were on the bottom of the strait. Not one Korean ship was lost. The Japanese fleet retreated all the way to Busan and never seriously challenged Korean naval control again. A 25-1 engagement, 12 ships, 0 losses. The second invasion, which had looked unstoppable days earlier, began to collapse. Without sea control, Japan could not sustain its forces. The momentum reversed. It was happening again, exactly what Yi had done in 1592. One admiral, systematically dismantling an invasion by controlling the water. In December 1598, the war's final battle came at the Noryang Strait. Japan was attempting to evacuate its forces from Korea. Yi moved to intercept them alongside Chinese allied ships. The battle was a crushing victory. Japanese ships were destroyed by the hundreds. Then a bullet found him. Yi was shot through the chest during the fighting. He knew immediately it was fatal. He had two witnesses nearby, his nephew and his son. His last words were in order. "Do not let anyone know that I am dead. Keep beating the drum. Keep fighting." His nephew put on Yi's armor. The drumbeat continued. The sailors kept fighting, not knowing their commander was dying on the deck behind them. The battle ended in victory. Only then was the armor removed. Only then did his men learn what had happened. The admiral who had never lost a battle had fought his last one, and made sure it ended the same way as all the others before he allowed himself to die. He was buried beside his father in Asen. Koreans lined the roads for miles. A man who had been imprisoned and tortured by his own government twice, who had been demoted to a common soldier, who had been given 12 ships and no resources, and told to fight anyway. Today, a towering statue of Yi Sun-sin stands in Gwanghwamun Square in the center of Seoul, one of the most visited monuments in the country. His war diary has been recognized by UNESCO as a document of world historical significance. Japanese Admiral Togo, considered one of the greatest naval commanders of the modern era, was once compared to England's Lord Nelson. He reportedly replied, "You may compare me with Nelson, but do not compare me with Korea's Admiral Yi Sun-sin. He is too remarkable for anyone. He fought over 23 naval battles. He won every single one. He saved his country twice from 2 separate invasions, with fewer ships, fewer men, and fewer resources each time. He was betrayed by his own government. He was tortured. He was demoted to a foot soldier. And when they asked him to come back with 12 ships and fight a fleet of 300, he wrote back and said he still had enough. History gave him every reason to give up. He never once considered it.